schools that were attending Afrocentric early college, just to name a few. I won't read them all, but I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to see them. What did we learn? Now, there was some very interesting feedback that in certain ways from our youngsters, from our very bright students, was quite counterintuitive. One of them is their deep appreciation for diversity and inclusion. They appreciate the difference of mind, the difference of language. These are youngsters who said, I appreciate the fact that we have all of this broad-scale language in our schools in a way that we could talk with each other during lunch. We can have these informal times during the day to actually engage each other substantively. Another one was the academic rigor. They actually want to see more rigor. They actually want to see more rigor. They actually want to work harder. They actually want to make sure that they have the supports that also align with career opportunities. I'm excited for us to be a part of, in partnership and collaboration with an administration that's working fervently, diligently about career tech education. We've made a considerable mark in this space, and we want to continue to do that. Our kids want to see it as well. I think another one that really stood out for me was stronger teacher-student relationships. Mr. Cole didn't say this. Mr. Cole is repeating what our children were saying to us. They want to see stronger relationships in the classroom. But we all understand as adults, as educators, as folks in this space, that that's all hands on deck effort as well. So it's not an indicting comment. I think it's one where they may understand that sometimes they have bad days, but sometimes the adults do too. And there's opportunity, there's space for growth and development there. So I was really pleased to hear that they gave that kind of honest and rich feedback to us about what they'd like to see in a classroom space. Now, what are we going to do about it? What is the Department of Engagement planning to do about it? They are promoting diversity and inclusion, and there are any number of ways. There is a report that was provided, an incredible report. It is accessible online right now. You can actually go to our website and download this report that spells out all the data, all the information, lays things out way more substantively than the 5,000-foot view that I'm giving you all. They want to enhance academic support and rigor. They want to implement student-led initiatives. So students talked about wanting to be empowered. Well, they're thinking very seriously about how we move those opportunities forward. Strengthen community engagement and continue conversations and actions. So this is not a one-and-done kind of situation. This isn't. Now we're going to work even more diligently in my committee to ensure that we're continuing these efforts. Next slide. I wanted to say, near closing, thank you. Thank you to all of our children who were so very honest with us about where they are and what they expect and what they want to see and how they want to be engaged and own their school district and their local school buildings. Thank you for that. I also want to thank the teachers and administrators who show up every day, and support children. When children are dealing with their chronic absence issues, they're still there to provide that support. When children come to school, and some educators have to cover ground for others for any number of reasons. I thank those educators in our local buildings throughout the entire district who show up and give the effort, in some instances give extra effort to make sure that our children are provided what they have. I needed you to hear that from me personally. So in closing, next slide. There you go. Get to know CCS. Get to know this district. If you don't know enough about this district and what our children are doing that defeat common credence, that defeat these common ideas of failure and everything else that this local community wants to posit about our children, get to know this district, get to know its data, learn what's happening in our school districts with mathematics, learning what's happening in our school districts with career positioning and career tech education. Learn about BZS. that's partnering with the city of Columbus to make sure that kids graduate high school with no college degree, walking into careers at $60,000 a year. Learn about my district. Learn about my children. And then come talk to us. Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you, Board Member Cole. Colleagues, I do have my booklet here at the table that I'll just pass down, but we will have copies of the report. As my colleague mentioned, it is also a downloadable on our website. So it was an amazing report. Thank you to the engagement team and everyone who worked to make that possible. At this time, I will hand it over to Vice President Pierce to give her report.
Thank you so much. Our Academic and Facility Alignment Committee met on Monday, November 4th. During the meeting, our committee established a framework to guide our decision-making process. This framework serves as a structured approach, offering guiding questions to help us organize and analyze the information shared with us to make decisions in alignment with the district's mission, vision, goals, guardrails, and strategic plan. Our goal as a committee is to ensure that our decisions are structured, consistent, objective, and efficient while supporting accountability. The adopted framework addresses two main areas of focus, noting that recommendations will come from our administration through two main areas: recommendations for what exists and recommendations for what will be new or what does not currently exist. And so our framework for exploring what could be new is made up of questions that ask, how does this recommendation support student learning and achievement? Will the recommendation enhance academic success, engagement, and student development with clear, measurable outcomes tied to student achievement, as earlier stated by Board Member Adair? What are the potential impacts on equity and accessibility? Does the recommendation consider diverse student needs, including those with disabilities, economic challenges? And does it ensure equitable access to resources? The framework asks the question, what resources and infrastructure are needed to implement this recommendation effectively? Are necessary resources, such as staff, technology, facilities, and funding, available and sustainable over the long term? Our last question, again, when considering recommendations that are coming from our administrative team, again, around a new or non-existent recommendation or area, that last question is, how will the effectiveness of this recommendation be measured and evaluated? What metrics will assess the recommendation success? And is there a plan for regular review and feedback integration? And that next framework that we have, again, explores what currently exists. And so that first question that kind of kicks off exploring what currently exists is, does the recommendation align with the district's mission, values, and strategic goals? Is the recommendation relevant to current priorities and supportive of district educational outcomes? What evidence or data indicates the recommendation's impact on outcomes, usage, and satisfaction? Are measurable results available to demonstrate effectiveness, or are adjustments needed? Are there unintended consequences or challenges since implementation? Has the recommendation affected specific groups or resources, more so, less? And are adjustments needed? What feedback from stakeholders has influenced the recommendation's success? Have parents, students, staff, and the community responded? And has their input informed improvements? And so that framework, again, the committee took a vote to establish and adopt that framework to be, again, the lens through which we analyze, discuss, debate the recommendations that, again, will come from our administration. This framework, again, was important as we received two great presentations from our administration during that meeting. The first one was around school choice. We learned the history of our lottery process. We learned what our first lottery schools were, how we added additional lottery schools and programs. We learned about how maintaining racial balance went into the lottery process, and we've also learned about how we have continued to change our school choice process as it relates to our lottery process. We spent some time kind of talking about in 1995 how we set some higher academic standards for our school choice lottery process, how we were giving parents greater choice in their children's schools, how we sought to use tax dollars effectively, and how we sought to establish healthy learning environments. And so with that, in 1995, we expanded kind of our lottery program, and so we learned the history around which one of our high schools are high schools that are 100% lottery, our middle schools that are 100% lottery, our elementary schools that are 100% lottery, but then also our elementary and middle schools that are not 100% lottery. The school choice and lottery presentation was very important because we see that there are some potential opportunities for our board to take as it relates to discussing, again, recommendations that will come from the administration around how we may need to change our lottery process, how we might want to change that process because it is having, as Board Member Adair noted, significant impact on our transportation and transportation costs. And so we're very much looking forward to, if Dr. Klein is not in the audience, I do see her picture up on the screen. We are looking forward to her team bringing forth some of those recommendations for our board to consider and honest. And again, because we are having those unintended consequences on transportation. Dr. Klein, is there anything you want to add to that? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but again, I think knowing that our school choice lottery process is very complex, very complicated, understanding the impact that it's having on not just transportation, but also the quality, high quality academic programs that we can provide, I think is important. And if you want to share anything on that, please do so.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce. Our team is working alongside of the transportation team to come up with some wonderful recommendations for our Board of Education that will allow our parents to still have school choice, but maybe not be so expensive with regard to transportation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Klein. We appreciate you. And so after we had the presentation from, again, school choice. We had a great presentation from Mr. Maurice Woods around transportation and some of those, again, the impact that our school choice lottery process is having on our transportation. And so while that presentation has not been loaded up on the website for that meeting that occurred last month, I hope we can get it up so our community members can see that transportation presentation, because taken together, colleagues, I think it's important for us to understand that while we appreciate and value our lottery process and programs, while we appreciate and value having school choice and providing opportunities for our families, we will need to evaluate and assess those particular programs, again, because of the impact that it's having on our transportation, but also because we want to make sure that we are offering the best high-quality academic programs that we can. So for our next meeting, we look forward to receiving those recommendations from our administration as it relates, again, to the school choice lottery process. And we definitely plan to walk into that decision-making process, understanding that it's going to be complex, but that we want to ease up some of the costs that are happening in our transportation area. Our next meeting will also have a SPED presentation. Throughout this year, I think we have had a number of concerned educators, community members, parents, and students come speak with us about that program. Our superintendent and definitely administration has also given us several presentations, but we're hoping that that committee presentation will consist of a distilling of that information, a summative of what those key issues are, and again, recommendations that our committee will be able to kind of discuss, analyze, and of course bring back to the board as it relates to, again, our SPED program. That meeting will take place on Monday, December 2nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. at 270 East State Street. Our committee welcomes the engagement of the community, so please feel free to, of course, go to our website to review our past meeting agendas and materials, but also please feel free to join us on Monday, December 2nd for that, what we are sure will be a great meeting and good conversation and dialogue.
Thank you, Vice President Pierce. Board Member Ingles, I know you didn't meet this month, so we will be looking forward to your report next month. So that will conclude our committee updates for this month. And at this time, we will move into item 5.4, which is a board consideration of demolition as recommended by ETRM committee, which I will hand it back over to Board Member Adair.
Thank you so much, President Vera. Last month, the ETRM committee did make a recommendation for the Board of Education to consider demolition on 3 structures on properties that are currently being used as active sites, and those are the old Wedgwood Middle School, the Deschler Elementary School, and the Franklin Annex. I've asked the administration to provide a report for us as well as photos. I do want to thank the team up front for going into these buildings. Once you see the photos, you will understand. And in fact, one of them we couldn't even get into because it's just not safe for our people to go in. So thank you, team. I know I pushed you to do that, and I appreciate it because I think it does tell the full story. So I'm going to turn it over to Maurice Woods for this presentation, and then I will make a motion at the end.
Thank you, Board Member Adair. Good evening, Madam Chair, Vera, board members, superintendent. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you today and talk a little bit about some of the conversations that we've been having about some properties that present themselves for demolition. We've had some robust conversation in our committee meetings, and I just want to thank Board Member Adair for facilitating and engaging us in those conversations. Today we're going to highlight 3 recommendations that we would like to bring forward to the board for consideration. If we can go to the next slide, I want to start by just giving a broad overview of our district. We have about 9.8 million square feet in facilities that consist of both academic and administrative buildings. Today's demolition conversation will focus on the lower right-hand side of this particular slide, specifically on vacant structures on active sites. And we bring these forward in this conversation because we really believe that by prioritizing these structures, it really allows us to remove some risks and some blight from some active sites that have students on these sites in some instances, but also for the communities. It's important that we work to ensure that we're removing these unsightful facilities from our communities as well. I'm going to bring up my executive director, or my director, excuse me, of capital improvements, Alex Trevino, who's going to walk us through the actual sites that we're going to make a recommendation for today. And at the end, we will be asking for a motion to approve these so that we can start on the demolition of these sites. Mr. Trevino?
Thank you. So I'm just going to work to kind of broaden the context for these structures, since I'm going to guess you really don't want to see, especially the insides of many of these. So just the big picture overview. So there are 3 of them. There's what we frequently call Old Wedgwood, and we like to use the word old because there is also New Wedgwood. And I'll show you on the map the context of how that facility is situated. There's Deschler Elementary School, and there's the Franklin Annex. And you can see there are a variety of sizes, 2 two-story buildings, 1 one-story building. Don't necessarily want to dig into the details too much, but I do want to just kind of stress that these buildings do represent a tax on our resources. So this is work orders performed by our buildings and grounds team. So you can imagine everything from somebody has broken into the building, a door or a window has been left ajar and needs to be screwed shut. The building's been tagged with graffiti, somebody needs to cover it up or have it removed. And then similarly with our safety and security team reporting to incidents that are being reported, either somebody loitering on a site, somebody has broken in. So again, just to stress that taking these buildings offline would result in some release to those departments of their resources. So we'll start with Old Wedgwood Middle School. So here is the view from Eakin Road. You can kind of just see at the front of the photo, so there are gates at the parking lot to try to keep vehicles off the parking lot. Once you move into the site, you can see that we have gated the courtyard that's in the front of the building, again, just to try to keep people out as best we can. Just to kind of get you situated with the site, so you'll see that yellow arrow right at the center. So that is the old Wedgwood facility. It has been vacant since 2008 when the new Wedgwood Middle School, which is just below it, that faces Briggs Road, was constructed. The old Wedgwood building was then reactivated as swing space during the facility master plan work for Georgian Heights. But when that building reopened, or when the new Georgian Heights opened in 2012, this building has been sitting vacant since. So it's been vacant for 12 years at this point. So there's the address, 3771 Eakin Road. The current Eakin Elementary sits right across the street. It's just under 70,000 square feet, and this building is 2 stories. The next building recommended is Deschler Elementary School. So this is the site from Deschler Road. There is on-street parking head-in right off of Deschler Road. This is the view from Lockbourne Road. You can see the modular building just to the left there of the main facility. And then I think what is maybe the most shocking is the conditions inside. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but water and weather in Ohio are our worst enemies. So buildings being vacant, nobody to report leaks, wreak havoc on buildings within a very short period of time. Here's a view down the main corridor. Again, you can see this building is well beyond any repair that we would recommend in terms of putting it back into service. This is the back side of the building where it's been tagged by graffiti multiple times, and rather than try to clean it at this point, it's just being painted over to remove any marks that are there. And then just to get you acclimated with this site. So this site sits at the corner of Lockbourne Road and Deschler Avenue. This is a 1-story elementary building. It's just under 44,000 square feet. And you see, while we don't have students at this site routinely, it is our athletic site for South High School. So Deschler Elementary was closed in 2010. And then upon the completion of renovations for South High School, some of you might remember that we used to have Barrett Middle School, and we had our baseball field at that site, but it was not even large enough for baseball and softball both. So the recommendation then was to relocate both of those facilities and to build them new at this site. So that's the site plan you see here right to the east of that facility. And so, yeah, I think that's everything for the Deschler site. And then that takes us to the Franklin Annex. And so this is the Oak Street view of that facility. This is the backside view that you can see from the current girls' prep school. And then again, no surprise, you see the interior conditions are very similar to what you see at Deschler, where we've got ceilings collapsing, significant water intrusion because this building has been vacant for quite some time. You can see in this photo even the reflection of the standing water in the corridor. And then floor tiles buckling and coming up where we've had standing water here as well. So then again, just to get you acclimated, the yellow arrow represents the footprint for this facility. So you've got Brighton Road to the front of the active girls middle school site. There's an alley that comes right up the middle of the site. And so this vacant facility is just north of that alley and again faces Oak Street to the north. That building's 45,500 square feet and 2 stories. It has been vacant. So this building was closed in 1996. And then there was a period of time where it was leased to the Teresa Dowd School, and that program moved out in 1999 and has been vacant ever since. So we do already have a contract in place that would allow these demolitions to move forward in fairly short order. And so here is a timeline that we've worked out with our vendors to make sure we had a good idea of what we could accomplish. So first steps in any demolition would be to get our permits in order, as well as abatement. You can imagine with the age of these facilities, they all have hazardous materials inside of them. So we're proposing that over the months of December through February, we'd be working through that permitted and hazardous material phase. And then you just see a progression of the timelines across the buildings, starting with demolition at Deschler, moving on to Old Wedgwood, and then wrapping up with the Franklin Annex. At the completion of the work, there's still some details we might work out in terms of leaving some limited pavement available, especially at the Deschler site, since it does support our baseball and softball fields for South High School, but otherwise these sites would essentially revert to just green space until future plans were in order. And that completes the report we have for this evening.
Thank you. Before I call for the motion, I do want to say that the proposal that the committee advanced was only for the demolition. The committee wanted to talk about future use and what could be and all of that, but really that is a discussion that we need to have with the community as well as with our community engagement and our academic facility alignment committee. And so again, this is a kind of a phased-in approach, and so just know, board members, that the plan would be that if we do approve this legislation, or this motion, the team would be using this timeline, but we would also, to bring them down, but we would also be wanting to work on a timeline to engage the community. I also want to say that, we can only do so many demos in a year, but we do have more properties to consider. So at some point, ETRM may bring another batch to consider maybe in the spring for future planning. But we do have some other properties, other buildings that are in just as bad as condition that the team advanced to us today. So in light of that, before you open the floor for discussion, let me go ahead and make the motion that we approve the recommendation by the ETRM committee to authorize the demolition of Deschler Elementary School, Old Wedgwood Middle School, and the Franklin Annex. That is a motion.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Board Member Adair, or I'm sorry, Vice President Pierce.
I don't think we get confused at all.
Sorry.
It's a first.
It's a first, ain't it? Okay.
I'm looking this way. See,
So,
my
it's
bad.
okay. So a couple of questions. Board Member Adair, you indicated that there are only so many demos that can be completed a year. Can you please tell our community members how many demos that is?
Well, I can turn it over back to Alex and Reese.
Wood.
Mr. Woods.
Woods, sorry, thank you. For specifics, but we the board actually already approved a contract earlier last year, actually, for allocation of demolition. So we are working within a budgetary constraint right now. But then also, we need people to do it. And so you have to have contractors available. But I'll turn it over to the team to answer.
Yeah, just how many demos a year?
Yeah, so, and I think Ms. Adair kind of painted the good picture. Right now, we have the capacity to do 3.
Okay.
So we've identified these 3. We believe that these are ongoing conversations, so we do anticipate coming back. But to specifically answer your question, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, we have enough capacity to do 3 this year.
Thank you. Next question. How much do we estimate the demolition costing? Or are we looking for best bid? How would this?
So for these 3 particular contracts, and I might hop on my phone real quick to verify before we wrap up, I believe the number is $3.5 million for these 3 projects. And so certainly as we think about future projects, the site and the size are going to very much dictate those costs. So we'll need to be real mindful of how much scope we're attempting to tackle.
And as we're looking for companies, do we have any LEDE aspirations? Are we going to invite local companies to come bid for this? What are we thinking?
Absolutely. I have LED aspirations.
All right.
And I think I speak for the board. I mean, we understand the market that we're in, and we understand the need to develop small minority, women-owned businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So we will continue to push for LED participation in our contracts, not only these, but other contracts going forward.
Can I just say, I appreciate the fact that you said develop and you said women business owned and small. Yes, I like the fact. So that was a commercial and a plug for the development of small businesses to do this type of work. My next question then, on slide 5, you indicated the work orders that, or just gave us a snapshot of that. Do we have an estimate of how much those work orders are costing us? Or did cost us? Because as I look at that, what we see in the red, that we're going to see a reduced approximately $10,000 per year for the total of the 3. Is that all that we're seeing in savings? Is there another amount we're seeing in savings?
So let me start with this simple one. So we wanted to do our best to capture potential savings. Some of them are going to be very difficult to quantify value. So what you really see here are more hours of people's time. But the one thing we did want to clarify too is on utilities. So there is no gas or water, so none of these sites are being heated. So there's not a lot of potential savings there. There is some limited power, particularly for site lighting, just to help with security as best we can. The one fixed cost is the one that you see bullet pointed there at the bottom, which is there is a cost the city assesses us for impervious surfaces. So that it's a relatively minor cost, but that is one that would come off the books once these buildings are demolished. But again, back to the work orders and the specific question, I don't know that we have any dollar values. We could certainly ask and see how difficult that is to quantify, but it really has more to do with people's time.
Okay. And then,
And again, the main reason that these are being recommended is for safety and health. These are sites that are on active sites. Our students are there. And so there is some cost savings, but it's really about the condition and blight on the community.
and I just wanted to reiterate, so we're just rough math and an estimate, we're getting, anywhere close to 160,000 square feet of land back that we could potentially use for redesign and repurpose for something else.
I trust your math.
Oh, no, don't trust it. That's just a
So,
quick estimation.
Yeah, I think that feels right based on what the numbers that we put up for square feet. And I just want to mention that I believe there's a lot of opportunity costs that are soft costs that it's hard to calculate now, but what's the opportunity of these sites and what can we potentially do with them moving forward? I think that's a cost that we can't calculate, but it's a benefit to the community and to the school that's currently adjacent to these sites. I just wanted to mention that as a soft cost.
No, I appreciate it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Board Member Cole.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate it. I just wanted to make a quick comment because I, of course, am a member of this committee. I thought I was greatly appreciative of the committee members and their thoughtful approach to this process, a thoughtful approach that took the serious consideration of community at hand. And in addition to that, what our thoughts are moving forward as an organization for the possible repurposing of buildings in a way that closes community gaps and answers the challenges of communities as we talk about our whole child approach, our child and in their family, community spheres of influence that surround them. So I appreciated that. I look forward to the ongoing conversation, particularly around some of the buildings that may come up for rediscussion again. But I would like us to have a more thoughtful conversation with administration as well about what can be repurposed, how we approach that process, and what is it that we can add value to the community as an asset that helps them deal with some of the challenges outside of the four walls of our schools. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
Mr.
There was
Simmons.
a second. Was there a second? You said
Yes,
it. Didn't
we
you? Okay.
We got it.
We got it. right?
Mr. Simmons.
Point of order. Madam President, I asked to be recognized, and our rules say that each board member is entitled to be recognized either twice on a topic or speak once for up to 10 minutes. I asked to be recognized. There's been other meetings throughout the past couple months that you haven't recognized me when I put my hand up to ask a question.
And I'm still not recognizing you now. You
Well,
are
y'all gonna
censored.
find out what Bill Moss really looks
And
like
you're
at our
and
next
you're
meeting.
Bill Moss.
And you're
My
still
word,
censored,
Stop.
and you're still not recognized.
You are
So
not. On his
you
worst.
know what it is, so please call the roll.
I don't think you
That's
were
my
really
friend's
committed
father.
to working
Board
together
Member
forward
Simmons,
as president.
Respectfully, you are not recognized to speak
We're
at
going to
this
continue
time.
to have these
Respectfully,
challenges for the
you
next
are
3
not-
years or the duration of your presidency.
Yes.
It's our rules.
Thank
Board
you.
members are authorized to speak either twice on an issue.
I'm
or
going to
once
ask
for
you,
up
you
to
are not
10 minutes.
recognized to speak, Board Member
We're going to
Simmons.
continue to have these challenges.
We are going to continue.
Every meeting.
If you don't
for
follow the
duration
protocol,
of
you
the
are not
presidency,
recognized to
duration
speak,
of
Board Member Simmons.
my
You
term.
are censored, and that is
We have
where we are.
rules, and you're declining to follow these rules.
I'm
This
following the
meeting has
censorship
become
that this board
just
approved.
as chaotic under your leadership today as it did become last Thursday.
Okay,
We're
Board
gonna
Member
continue to have
Simmons,
these
thank
Mr.
you. At this time, I'm going to
We're
please
gonna
ask you to
continue to
respect the
have
order. You have
challenges,
not
President
been
Vera.
recognized.
Mr.
so
Simmons?
thank
Point of
you.
order.
Body's rules.
Thank you, thank you. for
Point
your
of order,
feedback.
Dr. Roush, I'm sorry. At this point, because the question has been called, we have on the floor to take the vote as a parliamentarian. Can you please tell us at what point are we at right now?
Voting.
We're voting.
Voting.
Okay.
So let's
Thank
get
you.
it going. Thank
Mi-
you.
Mr. Simmons,
You know, I'm not voting until I get recognized to speak on a topic, as all board members are allowed to. And so,
Next.
President Vera, we're
Is-
just going to continue to have these same conversations,
so,
these same challenges
Mr.
every
Dr.
meeting
President-
for the next
Dr.
3
Roush,
years.
point
President,
of order.
Every meeting
Are
for the
we
next
at
3
the
years,
point where,
we will continue to have these
Doc, next
same
call.
challenges.
Board
just
Member
voting.
I'd like to
Simmons,
speak
respectfully, you
Next
have
call,
not-
Dr. Roush.
President
have not
Vera.
been-
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Adair.
Yes.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Ms. Ingles.
Yes.
Vice President Dr. Pierce.
Yes.
And motion carries.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, moving right along to item 5.5. As a quick update, as we have been working alongside a majority of my colleagues around the realignment process, I did want to offer that, we have been working with Dr. Green not to evaluate the task force's process. This was to bring in someone to help us with creating a process of our own as we are evaluating the 9 recommendations. And as part of that process, we have been working alongside of him to create a guide. And this guide was very helpful as a majority, or most of us, some of us were able to go out and visit these 9 school communities a few short weeks ago. Last week, we started off on debriefing that process. We didn't get through our full agenda, but it was a good opportunity to start thinking about how we are going to dissect the data and how we're going to be able to have in-depth conversations around what we saw, what we heard, what we experienced. And so I wanted to offer an opportunity as part of our homework from Dr. Green that night. He provided us some work for the 4 members that were able to go on the tours. There was something around, after visiting the schools, a reflection prompt. And the reflection prompt was offered around 3 specific areas to consider. What resonated with you the most, what you learned, and what you still wonder. And so tonight I wanted to give my colleagues an opportunity to offer that reflection. We are going to be having a special meeting, a part 2, to our work as we are working together to get to a place of conversation around next steps. We are having a special meeting this coming Thursday at 6 p.m. here at 3700. I also wanted to note that there is a Realignment School Communities webpage now live where it serves as a page that we're going to be updating. There's information now about the process that we've taken as a collective, for most of us anyway. And so tonight I just wanted to give opportunity for us to have that conversation, and then on Thursday we'll be able to have a deeper dive as to what we saw. Many of us are very committed to a true engagement process, to vote on buildings that we've never walked in before, to vote on buildings that we've never taken the time to talk to staff, students, families, that was not a process that many of us felt comfortable with. And so we've been working with Dr. Green. We've been working many hours to figure out a process that we could be able to spend the time that we need to spend. The superintendent's task force, they did their job, but this board was not a part of that process. So for us, it's about taking the time we need to learn, to experience, to hear and learn from. And so I want to open up, I'm going to start with Board Member Adair. If you want to go ahead and provide and this reflection is your overall experience. We'll have our deeper dive on Thursday specific to the 9 communities. But tonight we're going to talk about the 3 prompts, what resonated with you the most, what you learned, and what you still wonder.
Thank you, President Vera. So what resonated with me the most in visiting the 9 schools, because I did visit all 9 schools, was that the numbers don't tell the full story. The visits definitely provided more context with the ability to see and experience what was happening on the ground. We have amazing kids and staff who believe in their learning communities in all 9 of these spaces. We do have success in every building. We have some level of community support in every building. A majority of our district's academic facilities, including every building I walked in as part of this process, are not adequate for the student outcomes our community has asked us to achieve, even where there is strong culture and climate present. I learned that we are currently using a model that I would personally describe of placing students in programs in buildings as put kids wherever they fit, anywhere they fit. Our facility choices are not best supporting the age of our students or their needs in these buildings. It was reconfirmed that we are not using equitable practices. This is within buildings and across buildings. I now have personal evidence and experience to consider when considering the challenge of equitable resourcing. The strength of building leadership is a direct indicator of the culture and climate in a building, as well as the obtainment of additional resources for their students, including additional money, outside partners, or experiences. I learned that we need to have better communication about the realignment process and speak about it more holistically with our community, including engaging the work of FMP and high school redesign in the discussion. We need to speak and demonstrate that we are building better learning communities for our children, not taking things away. Everything we must do must be framed under the lens of the academic vision and improving student outcomes. I'm recommitted to taking big, bold, aggressive steps to make changes on how we structure education in our district. Our work as a board, administration, school communities, and our community in general is critical. We must work together. It must be done strategically and under a common vision. We have to do this in a way that helps us move faster than we ever thought possible. And I still wonder if the current buildings are the right ones to start with. Some of the recommendations do not strategically align with the overall vision that has been articulated by our superintendent. I am interested in advancing our academic vision, not closing buildings so that we can say we did. I am interested in advancing a long-term strategy for improvement. The equitable impact to our communities and our families is something that I also continue to wonder about, as some of the schools on this list had enrollment that shows that they are more than 50% neighborhood students, meaning they walk to school. And I wonder what the additional burdens on our transportation system would be by moving these neighborhood students to buildings where they would require transportation. So those are the overall things that resonated, things that I learned or recommitted to learning, and what I still wonder about. Thank you, President Vera.
Thank you, Board Member Adair. Board Member Ingalls.
What resonated with me was the resilience of our students and our staff. Walking into these buildings was a different experience in every single building, and we were greeted differently and presented information in different ways. But it was really driven by the school and the community in that school, and that was something that really resonated with me, is understanding how that school wanted to tell its own story to us as board members as we were there. Like Jen said, I visited all 9 schools, and each of them were truly a different experience. What also resonated is that our students and our staff are working hard every single day, and our kids are showing up excited to learn, excited to participate, and they are learning. And our staff are showing up every single day, trying to work hard, trying to educate our students. But our staff are having a different experience depending upon what building they are in. I learned that some schools are very specific community driven, and what I mean by that is that they are very embedded in the specific part of Columbus, and they have lots of volunteerism that comes from that specific part of Columbus, and they have a lot of engagement with that specific part of Columbus that they are located in. And some of the other schools are more citywide, and students come from all over the city, and volunteers come from all over the city, and it really has more of a citywide feeling when you walk into that school. That goes to, again, the different experience in the different schools, depending upon which school we were in. I think that there were different opportunities in the different schools as well. You saw different types of after-school programming, depending upon what school we were in and what part of the city we were in. We saw different opportunities for after-school engagement and different opportunities for parent engagement and different opportunities for student engagement. And so I learned a lot about that. I also learned that some of the data that we were looking at and that the task force had examined seemed a little off to me. It either seemed delayed or it seemed out of date, and it did not tell the full story of what is going on in the school. And so unless you were in the schools talking to the educators in the different classrooms, unless you went and saw a lunch period and saw how students move through the hall, I don't feel like you could tell from numbers on a page what the school feels like and what the experience is being in that school. So I learned a lot about that. What I still wonder is something that we will get to in our community meetings, but what my colleagues who visited took away, where we agree, where we disagree, and where that real conversation can happen. I wonder what our community thinks, and if our community agrees with my assessment of experiencing and going through these schools. What other information we as a board should be considering when making our decisions. There is a thing called decision paralysis, and if you're presented with way too much information at one time, it can paralyze you. And so I'm not interested in being paralyzed, but I am interested in making sure that we consider every aspect and every detail that we need to be considering in order for this board to make an educated decision and to make the right decision. And that is what I'm interested in. I am interested in making the right decision. And then I wonder what the impact of our decisions will be. How we will move forward not only as a board, but how we will move forward as a district, and where we want to grow, and making sure that the decisions that we are making today are setting the stage for the growth and the vision that we want to see tomorrow. And so that is something I'm very committed to and something that I wonder coming out of those conversations.
Thank you, Board Member Ingalls. Board Member Cole.
Thank you, Madam President. My colleagues, stated it so very clearly. Resilience was a key word that resonated with me profoundly. I think another opportunity, another thing that resonated with me was this process altogether. I greatly appreciate Dr. Green's work. I greatly appreciate the approach of his work that's very objective, that gives us an opportunity in a very education rounds kind of way. That education rounds comes from doctors' rounds. It comes from an actual hospital rounds model where folks get the opportunity to observe what they see, everything from timing to behavior to activity to questions, and then debrief on that. I think we had the opportunity, I'd like to see us have a better opportunity to really practically and functionally debrief. So, Madam President, if it's fair to say that our next coming Thursday meeting is a working meeting. It is a working meeting. But with that, I greatly appreciate the process and what I had the opportunity to see. I echo everything that my colleagues said in terms of what they've learned and what they observed. I think my final takeaway is, and what I wonder is, if we can get to a space where we actually have the opportunity fully to see these schools. So I'd like to at least have 2 of our members who did not get the opportunity to visit the schools. Is there the opportunity to make that time and get that chance to do that, at least before the year is up? If there's an opportunity, I really encourage you to go visit those schools yourselves, get the data that they shared with us, and then have your own personal experience there in a way that can substantially contribute to the conversation moving forward. And then final, can we design a preliminary, because I want to settle with, despite whatever commentary we have shared, and I'm amongst that shared mindset, we are still in this all together. This is our challenge. This is our work collaboratively, and I don't take any of that away, and I don't take it for granted. So, Doc, I really personally, from my heart of hearts, need you to understand that, if not for all of us, and I think all of us sit in that position, but definitely for me, that this is a collaborative effort where we're working together. I'd like to see us preliminarily design or come to a level set of what you see in terms of vision, where we can work together to design a vision that then helps guide us further in the process about how we make decisions around our facilities. Whether we condense high schools, how we approach this academies model that you're thinking about, that you've spoken so much about, I think there's an opportunity there. So I wonder how we begin that process, what the will collaboratively is to do that, and, you know, of course, what great outcomes that I anticipate coming as a result. So I thank you, and I thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Cole. I echo a lot of what my colleagues have shared already. What resonated with me most, I have here, I was deeply moved by the resilience and pride these school communities have for their schools. Despite the challenges they face, the sense of connection, history, and dedication from students, staff, and families really stood out to all of us, as you've heard tonight. It was clear how much these schools mean to the neighborhoods they serve as well. Although the board created a guide for the tours, each school community organized the tours differently. Some were student-led, some were staff, and some were parent-led. I learned that each school has unique strengths and stories that reflect the character of its community, from innovative programs and committed educators to passionate families advocating for their children. Their schools are more than just buildings. They're hubs of culture, learning, and support. I learned that despite the passion and commitment of our students, staff, and families, many of the facilities face significant challenges, some of which are deeply concerning and they are not adequately accommodating. I observed instances of staff shortages within buildings, which in some cases resulted in overcrowded classrooms or limited academic programming and services. I learned that some building leadership, staff, and families felt inadequately supported by the board and district leadership. Some concerns raised included limited resources to improve enrollment, unresolved facility issues and deteriorating conditions, insufficient programmatic offerings, and lack of extracurricular or wraparound support. I learned that some investments have been made in these school communities. However, they have not been equitably distributed across all schools. Many of the schools identified for closure or consolidation are in fact neighborhood schools where students either walk or are driven daily. I also learned that a majority of these schools have relatively new building leadership or leaders nearing retirement, which can create a dynamic of transitional leadership in many of these communities. I learned that the students, family, and staff I spoke with lacked clarity about what an implementation timeline would look like if their school were selected for closure or consolidation. Additionally, many were unsure about the reason behind the district's assessment of school community closures in the first place. I still wonder, how can we ensure that any decision made truly prioritizes equity and the best interests of our students and families? How do we balance the need for systematic change with preserving the critical community ties and resources these schools provide? So that was my own personal reflection. And as I said, on Thursday, we will be coming together to have a more in-depth dive into our 9 school communities. And with that, you know, as I've mentioned before, this is a process. This is a new process for us as a board. And for many of us, really taking the time to think about not just the decisions and how they impact us today, but the future of this district 20 years from now. And so before I move on into our agenda item, I know Dr. Pierce had one thing she wanted to add.
I just wanted to add the point, given that our colleague invited us to go see these facilities. I think, one, we want to state that there are many ways to engage with these communities and facilities outside of these organized visits. While I thank the superintendent for that, there are many ways to engage with the communities and the buildings. And so as elected officials, we understand that we're going to have to make hard decisions. But in fact, that's what we're elected to do. And now we must move forward to make that decision. Please know that I have listened and have been a part of conversations around what the solutions are. We need a task force to identify the solutions to repurposing these impacted school facilities in these neighborhoods, to ensure that we are thinking of how we can redesign these spaces so we do not have vacant and blighted buildings sitting there for decades and years. I believe that we know what we must do at this time, and that is to make the tough decision based upon the information that you all have collected through your visits, the information that we have on enrollment, the vision that our superintendent has articulated through the strategic plan, through the goals and guardrails that she is establishing and moving forward with community partners, such as one of the task force members that spoke earlier today. And so I believe in this particular moment, again, I am very much prepared and ready to move forward to make that tough decision of what schools we will move forward to close. Again, I am calling for us putting together a task force to identify solutions to repurpose these impacted school facilities in these neighborhoods, and understand that I have been in conversation and communication with our community members, those school members and educators, and we need to move to do what is best for education in the city of Columbus.
Thank you, Vice President Pierce. And as a point of clarification, when and if the board makes the decision to make any closures or consolidations, there will be a task force or a community group put together to create the planning process. That is something that will be led by our superintendent in partnership with the individuals that she deems appropriate. So there is a process to this. We're not at that process right now at this table in this moment. However, that is what the process would look like moving forward. Before I move on to our next agenda item, Board Member Reyes.
Thank you, President Vera. So I did have several conversations with our parents that go to these schools, and I actually run a community center that it's in the some of the school areas that we're considering. Our parents mainly talked to me about them not understanding the process. Many of them didn't understand why their building was empty. Some of them didn't even know their building was empty because they spent a lot of time in parts of their building. Some of the parents didn't understand that when we talk about neighborhood schools, there may be another neighborhood school near them where they can still continue to be walkers in some areas, and whether that would be an option. Especially some of our ELL learners, they felt that even though there was some resources in other buildings, they were directed to that building, right? So they didn't understand that they could go to another building. So I think there's a lot of communication that we need to have, even to the people that may be impacted, about what does it mean when something closes, and what are those parameters that were looked at for whatever reason, even though we have shared some of that data, it's still not getting to the parents who are going to be most impacted, right? Having those conversations, and even to our students. Talking about not necessarily what's in the building, what's going on in the building, which is good work, but the building itself. Some of them, when we talked about this was built in 1929, they were like, oh my God, I didn't know that. But now that I look at it, I can confirm that that's what it is. I think one of the things, I continue to be challenged by the way that we streamline partners that help in our education goals, right? So some people had one partner, others didn't, and this is something that's been going on for a little while. So how do we best utilize our partners in those areas so that we're seeing those increases throughout our district? So a lot of people talked about that as we looked at some of our tables. And I would be challenged, things that I still wonder as a person that's been involved in several closures, you know, when we make a decision, when I've made a decision, we have to have a vision of 10 to 15 to 20 years, because some of the decisions that have been made and some of the decisions we will make may impact a school. So when you close 2 or 3 middle schools or elementary schools that feed into a certain high school, and you redirect them to another high school, that high school is then going to be empty, right? And that's what has occurred in some of these districts, in some of these buildings. So we need to really make sure that we understand what our future growth looks like, what our resources are, what our educational plan. And at the end of the day, really understand that we still, even though we passed a levy, there's still limited funds. How do we become a state-of-the-art district where we can put all our resources, not only monetarily, but our teachers? I mean, there was a parent I talked to, she's like, oh yeah, my kid sits in a classroom with 12 other kids. I'm good. Right next to her, the other parent was like, well, wait a minute. My kid's sitting in a school with 25, 30 kids with her teacher. So that disparity, you know, but when I was able to give them information about, well, that's what happens. So you have this while somebody else doesn't. So we need to talk about how do we make sure that every child has the same thing. So there's still a little bit of homework we need to do with our families so that they understand that our hope, our desire, our goal, including members. I mean, we had a person from our initial task force. The desire is to make the district a better district so that they choose this district, so that others that may have left the district will come back. And the only way that can happen is that we have all the available resources in each of the buildings, and that our buildings are full of kids and they all have, you know, a good teacher to student ratio. And but we have to help our community understand what would that look like, and then we have to understand how to minimize that impact. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Board Member Reyes. All right, colleagues, so we are going to move on to item 6.1. Do you have any other reports for us, Dr. Chapman?
No, I don't have any additional reports. Just also want to remind everyone that next week is our Wellness Week across the district. So that's for students and staff from Monday through Friday. We will be focusing on our own mental health and well-being throughout the district, throughout the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chapman. Good evening, Auditor O'Connor. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you.
Good. Do you have any updates or report? Okay, thank you. And I know our treasurer is not here this evening. Did he say anything? Any updates?
No
Okay.
updates.
All right, very good. All right, colleagues, we'll move into item 9.1, public hearing on reemployment of retired employees. Pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code 3309.345, the Columbus Board of Education gives notice that Rhonda L. Gear, instructional assistant who retired from the Columbus City Schools effective June 3rd, 2022, is seeking employment with the Columbus City Schools as an instructional assistant effective December 18, 2024. Okay. And we will move into our consent agenda consisting of items 10.1 to 26.8. Is there an item that a board member would like to have moved for a separate consideration? Any discussion?
Yes, Madam President. I believe it is the 22.1 legislation. Just a few questions about it.
Okay, so that is a motion. Is there a second? Or you just want to have a discussion? Do we need to move that for discussion?
Should be, technically, it should be moved for discussion.
Yes.
Okay, so that is a motion. Is there a second to move for discussion?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Ingles?
Yes.
Vice President Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes? Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
President Vera?
Yes.
Ms. Adair?
Yes.
That item is removed from the consent agenda and will be moved under other items.
Okay, so that will move me down here. Give me 1 second. 27.2. All right, so we will move back to our consent agenda consisting of items 10.1 to 26.8. Is there any other items a board member would like to remove for separate consideration, discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Point of order, the consent agenda actually starts at 11.1, that's a typo.
They have me at 10.1.
The first piece of legislation approval in minutes is 11.1.
Yeah, it's at 10.1 on this.
You're just approving the consent agenda.
So 11.1 to 11.1 to 26.8. Okay.
I need a motion and a second.
Second.
I need one. I need a
Or,
A motion.
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 what are we motioning?
We're motioning for items 11.1 to 26.8 to approve the consent agenda. Motion appears second.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Simmons?
Point of order, Chapter 42, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, debate.
President Vera?
And
Yes.
1 through 6 are explained the necessary
Ms.
steps
Adair?
Yes.
preliminary to debate.
Mr. Cole?
That when no
Yes.
business is pending,
Ms.
a
Ingles?
member should
Yes.
should
Vice
rise
President
and
Dr.
be addressed
Pierce?
by the
Yes.
chair by his title.
Ms.
The
Reyes?
recognition by
Yes.
the member shall have obtained
Mr.
the floor.
Simmons?
No, I've made my point.
Okay,
The motion carries.
thank you. Moving down to items 27.1, authority to continue the service agreement with Ohio State University. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Please call the roll.
President Vera?
Yes.
Ms. Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Ingles?
Yes.
Vice President Dr. Pierce?
Abstain.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Point of order, once again, President Vera, our rules say that each member is entitled to either speak once
Sorry,
on
board
this
member.
issue
Mr.
for
Simmons.
10 minutes at length or twice on any issue.
Board,
Denied me that
Board Member
opportunity to
Simmons,
speak
once
on
again,
each
as a
topic
point of
of
order,
the
you
agenda.
have not
And
been
this is an
acknowledged to
example
speak.
of your poor leadership
This-
that we've seen over the last.
By poor leadership,
Mr.
Board Member
Mr.
Simmons,
Simmons?
you're out of
Don't-
order,
don't get
sir.
into it.
You're out of order. Board Member Simmons, you are out of
Roush,
order.
this happened-
You're out of order.
Last vote.
Okay,
out of
well, we
order.
need to move
So
into discussion
item-
for
let's
item
continue the meeting.
20.2.
I made my point.
27,
Continue now.
we're at 27.2. Board Member Cole, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. So I had a question just to the administration. We want to make the 130,000 plus expenditure for a new staff person in a supportive role to support chronic absenteeism under the leadership of Mr. Pollard. Why can't we just, why do we have to, share me the rationale of going through ESC as opposed to just hiring the position through us directly?
Well, there are a variety of reasons, but I just want to name that this is a grant. We received a Stronger Connections grant a couple of years ago, and most of those positions were on the grant and were through the ESC, but there was a transition, and so we want to make sure we continue to have capacity in this space. As you see in the legislation, we've made consistent and steady progress in this area by leveraging additional outside resources to support this work. So we're, again, want to make sure we have the capacity to do that and leveraging resources from a grant where the team was very intentional about seeking out additional resources to expand our efforts across the district.
In addition to that, you said there were a few other reasons. I just wanted to get a rationale.
So for example, we receive funding through the ESC, and there's several resources that we receive through the ESC. There's only a certain, the ESC really defines for us how we can leverage those resources, and we can only spend those resources on strategies that are connected to our strategic plan, our goals. They want to also see that the way that we're allocating these resources, that they're intentional strategies aligned to support district and school-wide improvement.
I thank you so much.
Welcome.
All right, so we're going to go back to item 27.2. Is there a motion to approve the agenda or to the legislation?
Motion to approve the legislation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please
Is
call the
that
roll.
22.1?
No, it's
No,
27.2 because we had to move it.
Got you, thank you.
Yes.
There we go.
That's-
Please call the roll.
Ms. Ingles?
Yes.
Vice President Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Point of order, Madam President, as I think about my responsibility.
Go ahead,
as board
President
member,
Vera.
Hold my colleagues
Yes.
accountable, and I think about
Ms. Adair?
how
Yes.
you and Board Member
Mr.
Cole
Cole?
have spent the last several months conspiring
Yes.
to employ his colleague, misleading our community
Mis-
about whether or
Mr.
not
Simmons?
you have the buy-in of a majority of members.
Right.
I just want to be recognized to
Motion.
talk about topics about that are
Are we
important to
done?
the community
Did it
that
pass?
sent me
Yes.
here.
Okay.
That's all.
All right.
I just want to be able to talk about.
All right, so at this
the
time, we will
agenda
move
like
into our
any
executive
other member.
session.
Thank you so
Board
much,
Member, Vice
President
President
Vera.
Harris.
I move that the Board of Education recess into executive session per Section 121.22 G1 Ohio Revised Code to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of public employees.
That is a motion. Is there a second? Please call the roll.
Ms. Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Ingles?
Yes.
Vice President Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Point of order, Madam President, again, for the past several
President
months,
Vera.
we've denied the
Yes.
opportunity to follow our rules.
You have 6-0.
Okay, thank you. At
Thank
this
you.
time, we will move into executive session. When we return, we will not be televised. Thank you all for being here. Have a good